all week on the Sports Bash, and it's Eagles Giants tonight at Lincoln Financial Field. Joining us now on the telephone, the Eagles beat writer from the Philadelphia Inquirer and Philly.com, Zach Berman. Zach, are you there?
I am.
All right, perfect. I apologize for my raspy voice, by the way, but I'll try to project enough so you can hear the questions. Coming off a head cold, and that happens when you work too hard. Zach, first chance for us to catch up since what took place in Baltimore, so I'll start there. Did you agree with the decision to go for two? And in the days that followed after it, how many times were there instances of you scratching your head over Doug's explanation for why he did the things he did?
Well, I agree with the decision. I disagreed a bit with the play call. I didn't have a major objection to it, but I would have rolled Carson Wentz out. But I absolutely agreed with the decision, and I would separate the decision from the outcome. You need to judge the decision sometimes independent of the result of it. As for Doug Pederson's explanation, I disagreed with him that it doesn't matter who the running back is on the field, because I think the defense is always going to be cognizant of the personnel. I do agree with his explanation that that was not a look you were going to run against. If you run against a zero blitz, just like he said, it's going to be a loss. But the advantage you have is that you have one-on-one coverage. So basically, if Jordan Matthews beat his man, which he did, you can get him open. The problem on that play, of course, is that they deflected the ball at the line of scrimmage. And that's kind of why I would have rolled Carson out, just to get him into space and potentially even run the ball there if the pressure's coming up the middle. And I wouldn't have had to rely so much on the timing of the play, but I absolutely agreed with the decision that he made.
Are there times that you what's your take on Doug Pederson? Because I think the number of instances for the fan base where they've seen challenges for 2 yards or plays getting in slow or plays that run for negative yards in Dallas and then they punt the ball instead of kick the field goal. I guess flat out, are there times where you think Doug Pederson is in over his head? Would you like to see him delegate some of the responsibilities?
I wouldn't characterize it as in over his head, but I do think there are times when he looks like an inexperienced coach, and frankly, that's what he is. They hired a head coach who did not have much experience before he came here, and he's kind of growing on the job. And I think you've seen that at certain instances. He's also made some good decisions. You know, when you look at fourth down, they have attempted the most fourth downs in the NFL, 8 more than the next team. And they've converted more than 50% of them. I believe 52, 53%. So right there, I mean, they're successful more than they're not. You talked about 2-point conversion. They have converted 4 of 6 2-point conversions this season. They were 4 or 5 going into that one at the end of the game last week. So the bad decisions are harped on more, and that's just the way it is as an NFL head coach. Last time the Eagles played the Giants, they were 1 of 4 on fourth downs. But after the Cleveland game, when the Eagles converted on a fourth down, Doug Pederson was kind of hailed for that temerity there. So it really varies based on the result of it. I wouldn't say he's in over his head. I would say, though, that there are times when his lack of experience sometimes looks to be apparent. And then I would also say that I agree he does have a lot on his plate by virtue of the fact that he's calling plays and he's doing the in-game management as well.
Scott Grayson here with you, Zach, as well. Zach, thanks for joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. And wanted to ask you about Lane Johnson. Obviously, he made his rounds around the building this week. Didn't have too much time to get back into the swing of things. What do you expect to see out of him tonight? What's your prediction for the kind of night he'll have?
Yeah, I'm curious, Scott. I want to see physically how he holds up because he's essentially coming from the couch and working out with baseball players down in Oklahoma. They're playing on Thursday night against the New York Giants. And so, he is an athlete, but, that's a long layoff there, and there hasn't been much practice time this week, as you well know. So my expectation is that he starts, is that he plays the whole game. But I don't know if he's going to look like the Lane Johnson of those first 5 weeks of the season, his first 4 games, first 5 weeks. I suppose he could, but if he starts and finishes the game and plays relatively well, that's the best thing that could happen for the Eagles.
What do you expect the result to be for Carson Wentz? Do you expect to see any kind of difference in him? It seems like lately he's been struggling to step into his throws. He throws off his back foot occasionally partly because of all the pressure he's facing. The pocket's getting smaller. With Lane back, do you expect Carson mentally to be in a little bit of a different place tonight?
I'm sure that could help. I mean, he did not throw an interception until Lane Johnson's last play of the season. So the last play of that Detroit game. In those first 3 games, Carson did not throw a pick. So there could be some validity there. Now the Giants, bring a lot of pressure. Carson had a real bad first half against the Giants when he last played. But I think that the Eagles need to get a running game going, and that's what could help Wentz. If you look last week, he threw an interception on his first pass, but he didn't throw one thereafter. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that they had a balanced offense. They were having success against Baltimore's rush defense. The Giants have a real good rush defense. It's not as good as Baltimore's, and the Eagles were able to run last week. I think the Eagles need to run tonight, and that will help Wentz out quite a bit.
I noticed on Philly.com, Zach, you wrote a piece about Doug Pederson's approach in a nutshell, essentially go for it. You have some good stats in there. The Eagles have attempted 25 fourth-down conversions, 8 more than any other team this year. Pederson's gone out there for 6 two-point conversions, which ranks 3rd in the NFL. How has his aggressive attitude played in the locker room overall? I noticed you talked to some of the players about that. What's their take on everything with the way he's managing those games?
Yeah, the players are the players really like it. First off, because I think a lot of players outside of what you're seeing in Seattle kind of like the aggressive approach sometimes. But also he's been fairly consistent with it. Now, you guys mentioned the Dallas game earlier when he punted it instead of kicking the field goal. I think that was the big exception. Otherwise, he's kind of stayed true to his word about the aggressive approach. And players like that. And I spoke to a lot of players this week about Doug, not just his decisions, but how he is during the week. And the thing that multiple players told me independently is that what they want to see is consistency from their coach. And in terms of the way Doug is operating with them, players have found that. Players like the way he is in that regard. So, I think there's a lot of areas for improvement from Doug Pederson, but I think I think his aggressive approach is something that is resonating fairly well in the locker room.
Zach Berman with us, Philadelphia Inquirer, Eagles beat reporter. You also see him on Comcast Sportsnet a lot, on Philly Sports Talk. You can find him on Twitter at @ZBerm. And some of your tweets, just great numbers, maybe not if you're an Eagles fan, but very relevant numbers about this matchup, Zach. Giants 8-2 in games decided by 7 points or fewer. The Eagles are 0-6. Giants plus 22 in point differential. Eagles plus 17. Of course, Giants have 10 wins. Eagles only have 5. And let's get into the Giants-Eagles matchup then, really dig into it a little bit. We usually ask people, what's the path to victory? So if the Eagles are going to win this game, what is their path to victory? How do they pull it out?
No, they need to be more efficient in the red zone, and I think that's a big problem with the Eagles here, and that's part of the reason why they're not winning these close games. I think they're too often settling for field goals this season. That's not earth-shattering news there. But you look at that last game against the Giants, and they were stopped on 4th downs in the red zone, and those could have been field goals, those could have been touchdowns. But that's a big part of it, and I think when you see the Giants' success in close games, when you see the way the Giants' defense has been playing, the Eagles can't settle for 7, or the Eagles can't settle for 3 when 7 is available.
Yeah, certainly last week it was a little fitting that they had their longest drive in plays and time of possession, and it ended with a Caleb Sturgis field goal instead of a touchdown, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And Sturgis has played fairly well this year. but the Eagles aren't explosive enough. And you know, the best number that proves that is that they haven't scored more than 2 touchdowns in a game since week 3. You know, think about that. I mean, that's been a big problem for the Eagles. There's so much attention that goes to Jim Schwartz's defense. I think the biggest problem right now is the lack of explosiveness in offense.
So kind of follow up, Zach, with the red zone issues, where do you put the blame on that? Is it on the fact that the receivers aren't giving Carson big enough windows to throw in, or he's just not doing well enough in those smaller windows when you get compressed at that part of the field?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything. I don't think it's one guy. I don't think you can absolve the quarterback from responsibility, though. The ball's in his hands. He's got to make, he's got to make plays. And I like the fact in that Baltimore game last week, he tucked the ball away there, and you saw him run into the end zone. I think there were times when the offensive line was an issue. You go the week before against Washington when he got sacked at the end of the game and fumbled. Well, Matt Tobin was hurt in that play. Ryan Kerrigan beat him around the edge. The wide receivers certainly aren't making plays in the end zone. The Eagles just don't have any deep touchdowns. I think they need to use Zach Ertz more than they have been. Zach Ertz can be a real factor in the red zone, and they don't involve him enough. When they started doing that more in Cincinnati, I saw it pay off. I think there's a lot of things that go into it. But I think Carson Wentz needs to have some of the responsibility because he's the quarterback, and that comes with that job.
Giants-Eagles tonight at Lincoln Financial Field, and Zach writes in the Philadelphia Inquirer and Philly.com, the big number, 2007. What's that big number, Zach? What's the significance of that?
Yeah, that's the last time that the Giants swept the Eagles in the season series. And, the Eagles have really dominated the series for the most part in recent years. But the Giants won that first meeting, and if the Eagles lose tonight, that means that the Giants would sweep this season series for the first time since 2007. And the other part of it is the Eagles have already been swept by Washington. They're swept by Dallas. I'm sorry, they're swept by the Giants tonight. Then you're looking at the Dallas game next week as the last chance for the Eagles to win a game in the division. And if you go 0-6 in the division, that's really not a good sign. 1-5 is not very good. 2-4 is not very good, but they're better than 0-6.
0-6 has that real stink to it. He's Zach Berman. He's the Philadelphia Eagles beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Philly.com, and he's been our guest here on Sports Bash. Zach, we appreciate your time so much.
No problem. Have a good night.